Everybody. It is Thursday afternoon, going up live this afternoon, to speak with a war veteran from Afghanistan and Iraq. And so he'll be hopefully joining me in 1 second. Just need Benjamin Sledge to, here we go. View request, go live. Hold on. He's joining me from Colorado Springs. There he is.
I'm on. All right. I'm a floating head. So
you are. Thanks for joining me today. I was just getting started introing you. You know, as we've been covering this whole situation back in Afghanistan, there's still thousands of Americans we need to get out, tens of thousands of Afghans. One story I wanted to focus on today was how you and other veterans from the war are processing, reacting to what's been transpiring over there, the challenges of watching that. And I was struck by the piece you posted on Medium. We posted yesterday, got some really great reaction to it, titled "This Is My Vietnam."
Yeah.
Provocative title, powerful piece. Before we get started here, I just want to note that we're using this opportunity to fundraise for heart support. And so, which is an organization you're working with. On the bottom of this live, you have an opportunity to donate to heart support, and all the funds will go to that organization. And I understand you guys are launching a new initiative related to supporting the mental health needs of veterans here.
That's correct. We've been working alongside another organization called the Veterans Project, which captures the legacy of our warfighters. And specifically, they get a ton of requests from other veterans who come into that space and talk about the stories that they hear these other veterans posting, and the ones that the Veterans Project has captured, and just how they resonate, feelings of hopelessness, addiction, suicide ideation, depression. And we effectively realized that there's been a lot of talk on veterans. You know, we can be kind of those petty people. We're like, we need better help, but we're not going to do anything about it. And so what we really wanted to do was focus in on building a coalition of other veterans. And right now it's being spearheaded by our executive director, another guy named Tim, from the Veterans Project. And together we are building a group of veterans that are passionate about building resources, mental health workshops, and different gatherings that will empower and impact veterans to take proactive steps in their mental health. And really, the way that begins is by us gathering, and then on top of that, pushing towards what we like to call post-traumatic growth. So we're all about growth. We're not about like, it's okay to not be okay. We're like, that's great, but like, let's not stay there. We really want you to take those next steps to where you carry out that warrior ethos of, loyalty and duty and courage in your career, your life, your marriages, your relationships. And that's really where, our heart is for the veteran population, so that we can help them overcome those struggles, readjust to society, and become, some of the best employees, some of the best fathers, some of the best workers in the industry out there.
Great. So we're going to talk more about that in a little bit, and I appreciate we've already raised nearly $200 on the bottom of the screen for heart support.
Thank you guys.
In just this first few minutes. So you were a former staff sergeant in the U.S. Army. Mm-hmm. You were wounded in Afghanistan. You served a tour in Iraq. You're in the Special Operations Civil Affairs unit. You've received a Bronze Star, Purple Heart, 2 Army Commendation medals for your actions overseas. You wrote this piece in Medium, and I'll quote from it, and we'll begin the conversation. And this part struck me. All of it struck me, but you said, "Afghanistan to us is like the hot girl you're dating that's all drama and then slashes your tires. Instead of cutting off the relationship, you prolong the bleeding until she's lighting your clothes on fire and throwing them out the window. You're also devastated when it's all over. And that's left is to replay what you could have done differently, what to do moving forward." And then you were discussing, as I paced my house in the middle of the night, rotating the hand that was broken on the fateful day in Afghanistan, I told myself that what I did in Afghanistan mattered and didn't matter. My friends' deaths mattered. The people I fought next to mattered. My tears mattered. The Afghan interpreters and those who risked their lives mattered. seeing little girls get an education and treated like human beings mattered, but the war, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
How are you holding up this week?
I'm going to do my best to keep it together.
It's all good, dude.
My wife, on Monday, I started just getting bombarded with text messages. All of a sudden, the guys in my unit were all reaching out to each other, and they're like, "Are you watching this?" And of course I'm watching it, I'm thinking about it, I'm dwelling on it, and then just like everything, starts to hit. And, so sometimes I'm okay. Sometimes I'm fine. And then like, I'm not okay. It's just like it all falls apart. And you think about, I think for me, the hardest moment was, I was in my backyard, and my son, he's about 1.5 right now, and I'm swinging him and he's laughing. And I just started thinking about the kids that I interacted with, playing soccer and just different things. And, my knees just buckled, and I couldn't stand. And I was just like, man, what about those girls that aren't going to have an education? What about, the interpreters that fought beside us? What about, and then, you just begin to think about your friends that you lost. And so it's like one moment I'm okay, the next I'm not okay. And it's like, I know all the mental health tactics in the world to help get me through this, but it doesn't change, the complete conflicted emotions that I feel regarding Afghanistan. Like, we all knew that this was going to happen, but just the way that it happened, I think most of us are devastated. I think a lot of us are angry. I think we're relieved. I think that, we have a lot of conflicting emotions. And I don't want to speak on behalf of all Afghan veterans. I can only tell you what I have felt myself. And then also at the same time, what I've talked to the other guys in my unit about and beyond. I've been lucky enough to have other friends reach out to me and ask how I'm doing. And I've just been like, it's been a rough go. It's a roller coaster.
Yeah, you were describing that roller coaster, and it's remarkable because you served in Afghanistan right just as the war was beginning.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there, and so I'd love to begin there and tell me your story about joining the Army Reserves, when you joined, and kind of give me your story to Afghanistan.
Okay, so I joined the Army Reserves in 1999, just like the Prince song, and this will date me and show how old I am, but it was like the Bill Murray comedy Stripes. Like, we were all barbecuing, we were screwing off. The last like big engagement was really the Battle of Mogadishu. Everybody knows it as Black Hawk Down. And, it's Clinton era, and we're having a good time. The only thing going on is like Bosnia and Herzegovina. And then like I had joined to pay for college. My grandfather was a paratrooper in World War II. And, we have a really long lineage of military service in my family. Like, my grandmother's dated it back to like a general under Napoleon. So
I was gonna say, it's that scene in Forrest Gump. I don't know if you remember it, where it's like my daddy, my granddaddy, my granddaddy's daddy.
Yeah, it's like, I am Lieutenant Dan, except luckily I have my legs, thank God, and some of my friends don't. But it's just everybody served. It's what you did, and so out of that, I enlist. I go to Fort Benning, Georgia, and start my training there, and take some time to go to college. And then September 11th hits, and by September 25th, I'm at the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare School in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and they are not playing around anymore. They're like, you're going to war. This is just it. And so everything just ramped up, and it was super serious, and they were just training you to death. And so I get home, and I left, in 2001. I get home at the beginning of 2002. I'm home for about 3 months, and then they're like, you're going to language school. And I'm like, fantastic. I'm going to learn Arabic. And they're like, no, we can't give you that slot. You're going to learn Spanish. And I was like, okay. So I go and I learn Spanish, and then as soon as I get back 3 months later, and this is now 2003, the Iraq war kicks off, and most of my unit had already deployed because I was in language school, and so I knew we were going to Iraq like long before the populace did. And so when it kicked off, I was like, okay, I'm going to Iraq, and then I get this phone call, and it's like, you're going to Afghanistan, and I was like, what? And so that by May or June, I think, of 2003, I'm gone. And it's just becomes kind of this wild ride where my team sergeant, who is one of my close friends now, he wanted to go to like the border areas. So he requested, he's like, hey, what's this little star on this map with like all the like explosion thingies all over it? And they're like, oh, you don't want to go there. He's like, I totally want to go there. And I was like, I don't want to go there. And I honestly tried to get out of it. Like, I tried to stay behind in Kandahar and work like a desk job. Because I was afraid. I was 21. I was totally afraid. And he sat me down and he said, hey, man, we're going to go do this together and we're all going to be afraid. And he's like, but I need you. And so I was like, all right. And so I got on a bird and headed right to the Pakistani border. And that's just when I realized kind of at that point, Afghanistan was this forgotten war, even then in 2003. And
because all the attention at that time was on the invasion in Iraq. The vast majority of U.S. troops were in Iraq. The conversation in the media was in Iraq. Afghanistan at that point, the Taliban had been kind of pushed out. We had a new government in Afghanistan. Bin Laden was hiding. I guess I don't know if he was in Pakistan at that point. It was where you were.
He was totally in Pakistan at that point.
He was in Pakistan at that point.
Yeah, 100%. We all knew that during that time period.
And so, and you're there, and it's like, what did they, when you get there, what's your mission? What were they telling you the objective was?
So, I mean, a lot of the civil affairs operation is, winning the hearts and minds of the populace, rebuilding infrastructure, gathering intelligence as needed to effectively help the commander of the battle space during that time period. And so you get to see the best of war and the worst of war because you're there with all the infantry line units. Sometimes you're attached to special forces. Other times we were rolling around with CIA contractors. I mean, it was bizarre experience for me just to go from like one day there's like these super secret guys that I've never even heard of. And, we're hanging out with them. The next day you're working with kind of these infantry guys. And so you're going through these villages, to minimize civilian interference on the battlefield. And so you're always working with the local interpreters, you're trying to do humanitarian efforts. You're also at the same time, pretty much the first person in the door if you're kicking in doors, just in case there's, families and stuff there. So you're the first people getting shot at also. And you're like, oh my gosh, everything is awesome and awful. I get to see the best of war and the worst of war. And, it ranged from, me building a school for girls and then just watching as the Taliban blew it up, the next day. So,
wow.
And I remember standing there in the rubble and just thinking like, what is wrong with these people, And at that point they were just running back and forth across the border with Pakistan, because there's about a 20-mile stretch of space between the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan that's really contested. And so we couldn't follow,
right, because the Pakistani military is there and that would set up a war with Pakistan.
And yeah, we almost had that happen. We almost had an international incident happen when I was out on patrol one time where the border guard said, hey, you're in Pakistan, and I managed to get a couple photos. It turns out these were guys on a U.S. terrorist watch list. So, and when we turned over the evidence, everyone was pissed. They were like, "Why didn't you kill these guys?" We were like, "We didn't know," and we were about to all get shot. It was real bad. It was a legit Mexican standoff. Like, no joke. It was like they have weapons pointed at us, we have our weapons pointed at them, and my team sergeant's like, "Get out of the car," and I'm like, "I don't want to get out of the car. We are totally gonna die." And we made it out of that situation, but they would just cross the border and we couldn't follow them. It would cause problems.
So we have a few hundred viewers right now, including a person, Bonita says, hello from Guam. Thanks you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in.
So I don't even know what time it is in Guam right now. I feel like it's Friday evening. But let's go back to you mentioned the example of them building a school for girls and then blowing it up.
Mm-hmm.
What was the reaction by average civilians in Afghanistan that you were working with? How did they feel about the American effort? How they, you discussed a bit in your piece
mm-hmm.
about their kind of ambivalence towards the Taliban. That was a bit surprising. Talk a bit more about that.
So one of the things that you have to really recognize, and most Americans do not understand this, I think a lot of the embedded journalists that came over really kind of grasped this. But the thing about the Afghan population is very tribal. And so you're going to have your tribal warlords that, people just pretty much pay homage to, that kind of oversee the security of those spaces. And then on top of that, you're going to have your mullahs, which is kind of like, that's your religious rulers, and imams, which are going to be the teaching of the Quran. And so they're extremely religious and extremely fundamentalist in their views. And so they most of the populace really adhered to, kind of the Taliban's teaching. They weren't as extreme, but as far as like women being educated, like no woman was educated while we were there. We were just like, that was literally an oxymoron. They would have laughed at us and been like,
but how controversial was building the school then? The school for girls that you guys built? Was that?
It was pretty controversial at the time. We worked with some, I think their plan was, honestly, and this is conjecture, but I think their plan was like, oh, great, the American military will be gone soon. We'll have a neat school. We can kick out all the girls, and then they'll have teachers and they put all the boys in. Kind of that practice. And, you had very disturbing cultural practices. Like there's a Frontline episode called The Dancing Boys of Afghanistan. If you've ever read The Kite Runner, there's a practice called Bakhtabazi. It's effectively child sex slavery, where young boys are raped by older men. And, as it was extremely disturbing for us, and we saw it happen firsthand. And, the American military responses was basically their culture, their rules. And, as somebody who views that inherently and morally wrong, you left horrified and conflicted. Like, should I have done something? Should I have disobeyed orders? And it's just kind of a very much rampant cultural practice that they have. So, I don't know how to handle that, and sometimes you don't know how to live with that.
Yeah, it's. The Supreme NATO Allied Commander Stavridis had a piece earlier this week in Time Magazine. He oversaw the war effort at high levels, and one of the lessons he learned was just learning the challenges the military still has with like navigating the cultural traditions of the country that they're working in. And you were there before we began trying to build an Afghan national army, right? You were fighting alongside Afghans at that time?
Yeah, so we had, they were called the AMF. It was Afghan Militia Forces, and it was kind of a disaster. Don't get me wrong, love the Afghani people. My heart absolutely goes out to them, and, it's why we're so conflicted here, so many veterans. But their culture and their values are not military discipline. So, I'm sure a lot of people have seen the videos of them trying to do like jumping jacks, and literally as soon as the sun went down, they were just getting messed up on hash. Like, they were always smoking hash. It was like, as soon as the sun goes down, it's hash time. And, you can't really fight a war when you got a bunch of like guys that are you're supposed to be training as commandos and everything, just totally screwed up out of their minds. And there was this one time we were on a patrol. We were sleeping on the side of this mountain in an area where they had tried to set up a forward operating base, and it was so hostile they just had to abandon it. And so we're staying there, and of course we get hit, and those guys are all messed up on hash, and they just come streaming down the mountain, hooting and hollering, just totally giving away every single position. And you have all these SF guys just running after them and trying to reel them back in. And so it was very, very difficult to kind of like train them in that respect, because of the fact that they had their culture. You have your Silk Road, especially running down from Spin Boldak into Pakistan. You know, opium and hash are very much their livelihood. And when you start messing with that, it will cause problems.
Wait, and what do you make then of how disciplined the Taliban fighters are versus the group of the army we tried to raise? What explained the difference to you, or was it too early on? Did you get some observation into like what explains the Taliban passion and their fighting skill and basically dealing with us and fighting us off for 20 years, and then the folks you were dealing with, the Afghans you were trying to work with to fight them?
Yeah, so you have to remember that the Taliban, and this is during the Afghan-Soviet War, they were originally the Mujahideen. We trained them. Yeah. And so the CIA they trained them. They got a lot of good training, and they were religious, fundamentalists. And I think there is an aspect, if you look at any type of religious fundamentalism that goes to an extreme, there is inherent discipline. And I think because of the fact that they were disciplined in those religious habits, it made it easy for them to be disciplined in fighting skills also. And at that point, you have to remember, they've been kicked out of Afghanistan as the ruling class there. And what they do is they're pissed. They embed with Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations that they let freely operate training camps inside Afghanistan. And then from there, you have the Chechens come in. So we had border fights where literally, some of the guys that were dead were Chechens. And so you have these different, terrorist cell groups that are all, interacting together and training one another, and they all have a common goal. And of course, they're going to take that seriously. They want the Americans kicked out. And they know incredibly how to run a PSYOP campaign, a psychological operations campaign, where they can just demoralize troops using guerrilla tactics, paying locals who just really didn't care to fire rockets at a base or take a couple pop shots at people. And so out of that, the real big issue then became like, who effectively are we fighting? Are we fighting these locals because they don't care? Are we fighting the Taliban? Are we fighting, these terrorist cells? And that became, it was like playing a game of whack-a-mole half the time. You're like, is it the populace? Should we raise the village because they don't care and they're just like giving them information? Because literally the day that I got injured, what happened is back then, before you had Kellogg, Brown, and Root, you would hire locals from the village. And one of them gave them all the information they needed to target everything. And that's how I got hurt. They knew exactly where the bunkers and everything else were, and it was just...
So that's exactly where I wanted to go next. And by the way, I should note, we've raised almost $1,100 so far for heart support. Thank everyone who's donating money on the bottom of the screen. We're going to talk a bit more about that in a little bit. But take me to December 10th, 2003.
Sure. Also, I want to address the thing. I did say Afghani. That's the currency. Afghan is the correct term.
Yes. Yeah, I saw
old habit. I apologize for that. I promise you, I do know better.
Oh, and we have one other question on the bottom here. Were women allowed to serve in the Afghan military?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay.
I never saw one.
Not in your experience. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So December 10th, 2003, I am literally sitting in, we're on this small forward operating base, and it's literally shaped like a triangle. And you probably have two company-sized elements. You're roughly 200 people on this base. And I mean, it's primitive. So we're all in the GP medium tents, which is those green tents that are just literally, vinyl. And we had built a few structured elements for our tactical operations center. There's kind of an open air gym. You can do what you can with concrete here and there, but overall, it's widely exposed. And for, the American military being as, tactical as it's supposed to be, they literally built it between two mountain ranges where they had these strategigic advantages just to fire or, host attacks from the actual city of Organy, or it's really a village. But that day, somebody on base talked, and we just started getting slammed with 107 millimeter rockets, which are typically Chinese made. And a lot of times they like to pack them with C4 or white phosphorus. It made them wildly inaccurate, but they would have spotters. And so that day,
wait, so explain for a second what does it mean for it to be packed with white phosphorus?
So white phosphorus is it's a kind of a chemical fire. Think of like napalm, where you cannot put it out with water. It's just burns it'll burn straight through your flesh, through your bone, the whole deal. It's a bad deal. So those were kind of the things that if that was getting shot at you, you knew that it was not just some local who had put some rockets that they had been paid on for a timer, and then they just shot over the base. Because all of a sudden you're getting these rockets coming in, just dumping in one after the other, and they're hitting all the strategic spots. And my job is to rally the locals, gather intelligence, account for everybody, and I'm there with the intel guys, and we're trying to make it to the bunker, and then like all the bunkers start getting hit, and all the guys we see running out, and they're like, they're effing targeting the bunkers, like find another place. And I'm like, where do we go? And so we ran into our makeshift chow hall, which had some fortified walls, and we get everybody into this one hallway. And then like me and my friend Steve are like the last people to like get there and get everybody ushered in, make sure they're accounted for. And then there's just the world goes black. And I wake up and I'm super confused. It's like that scene in Black Hawk Down where that dude gets the RPG explodes near his head and everything just, it's this large buzzing noise. You feel like you're underwater, and I'm yelling and asking, all manner of expletives. And I look down at my arms and I'm really confused because there had been a glass window there, and like I have all this translucence all over my forearms, and so I start like rubbing them, and then just my hands and my arms start bleeding, and I'm real confused, and I realize I'm wiping glass into my skin and cutting my hands, and I look around and I can't find my buddy Steve, and my first thought is, my God, he's been vaporized. And he had actually been blown through another door. And so I went through the door, and he is like, there was all these cables there, and they had just been smashed to like pieces and tossed over. And then it looked like a scene from The Walking Dead, like where you just basically have this blood trail smeared in like one section. And I look over in the corner, and Steve's over there just holding his arm and rocking back and forth, and there's just blood everywhere. And I'm like, trying to get my bearings. I'm like, let me see this, man. Like, what happened? And so he's like, I think, once my hearing finally comes back, expletives, more expletives. And I grab my dagger and I cut open the sleeve to his uniform. And it looks like like a pop can had exploded in his tricep right here. And there's just fat tissue, blood's pouring out. I'm like, uh-oh. And at that point, this is the great part about the military. They train you with muscle memory repeatedly. And so I just go into muscle memory mode. And my other friend,
and you're wounded. You're wounded. You have all the.
I don't have a clue I'm wounded.
You're treating him.
Yeah, I have no clue I'm wounded. I'm just like dazed and confused, I don't even know that there's like, and luckily all the shrapnel was very superficial. It just, cut me and made me blood and stuff like that. And I still have the shirt where it's just like shredded in the back. And luckily my body armor did save my life because there was a piece like wedged in the back there. So, but I went head first straight into a wall, and that's just literally where it just took me out. And so another guy, his name's Gallo, he runs in, another intel guy, and like he's like, oh God, and he helps me lift him up, and I'm really struggling, and I can't figure out like why I'm struggling. And we put him over our arm, and there's just blood dripping everywhere. We pull him into the safe area, and these Afghans they're staring at us just wide-eyed, like thinking we're gonna die, And so we get him out of the way, and I'm yelling, he's yelling, and you have to remember, we had been trained with Vietnam era tactics, and so you had this little pack that you would keep on you, and they would always tell you, that pack is for you. You cannot use it on anybody else, because if you use it on them and then you get wounded, you'll die. And Steve's had been blown off. We didn't know where it was. And so we got in this argument about whose we should use. And then we're like, oh, we're near the kitchen. We can use fresh towels. And so anyways, we start wrapping them up. And I'm like, we got to get the medics. And so I run out the back door, and they just erected a wall to where we had said, our mass casualty was going to be. And I'm like pounding on it. And I'm like, hey, and my voice is cracking. And I think I'm going to die. And, the fear really starts to take me, and my hands are trembling. And another rocket comes in as I'm running back, and it just knocks me to the ground. And at that point, that's when I really lost my gall. And I ran back in there, and I was like, Gallo, it's your turn to get blown up. Go find the medics. And then I just went to work as the medic, patching up Steve. And he's in total shock. He's ghost white. He's asking for water. Luckily, muscle memory, I'm like, hey, can't give you water. You'll go into shock. And so I just continue to staunch the bleeding. The medics finally come back. Gallo actually was really the real hero in this. And so he comes back with the medics, dodging all these explosions, and there's these bullets flying over. I mean, it's just crazy. And so he comes back in. The medics are so shaken that they're trying to start an IV, but their hands are just shaking the whole time, and they're cursing, and they're trying to get this IV started. And then that's when pretty much I started to just black out. I was still awake, but to this day, I don't remember anything after them trying to start an IV. And the next thing I know, I am standing on we have this makeshift tarmac, which is just this rocks, and there's a fuel depot there, and they could really only land helicopters there for a few minutes because of the rockets. It would literally land, throw everybody off, and then they're gone. Otherwise, they were getting blown up. And so I guess they had called in a medevac, a medical evacuation via helicopter, and I'm just standing there watching the helicopter fade into the distance, and I'm just clutching his rifle. And then my team sergeant, Paul, he found me, and he could tell I was not okay. All my words are slurred, and I'm like, hey, I'm fine. And he's like, dude, you're covered in blood. And he's an EMT and a medic, in civilian life by trade. And so he's jacking with my head, and I'm like, knock that off. And then I start, I start having word salad to where things aren't making sense. And he's like, uh-oh. And so they take me. My hand starts to really swell pretty badly, and so they have to splint it. And they're like, hey, he's got a concussion, you gotta, and this is before we knew about traumatic brain injury. They're like, you gotta keep him awake and make sure he doesn't die. And I'm like, this is awesome. And then I'm like, he's like, all right, we gotta get you medically evacuated. And they're like, bad news, sandstorms in Kandahar, we can't get him out. And so I literally just had to stay there for 3 days. And then they finally evacuated me. So.
What was Steve's recovery like?
He had a funny recovery. So there's a story I love to tell about it. This is actually in my book too. It's coming out next year.
I should note you finished your memoir. It's being published next spring.
Yes, yeah. General H.R. McMaster has the manuscript right now. I hope he likes it. So hope he wants to endorse that. That would be awesome. But I wanted to take a different approach than a lot of the novels that I've seen come out right now, where everyone's a sniper shooting people in the face. And for me, it just doesn't capture the complexity and the barbarity and the humanity that's involved in war. And everybody paints themselves out like a hero. And I was like, man, most of the time I was not a hero. Most of the time I was afraid. You're
a hero. You have I want you. I don't know if you see all the notes on the bottom of the screen. People talking about your testimony, your bravery, thanking you for your service. A number of folks here are very thankful and grateful for your service.
I appreciate that. Your support, and if I can just say this real quick, the overwhelming support that we've received from civilians and just people that have reached out to me has been insane. And so you guys have really done this right. Whereas, Vietnam vets just really, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a while, had it rough. We have had it so good, and we are so thankful to the civilians that have, thanked us for our service. And regardless of whatever political aisle they land on, they have been incredibly supportive, incredibly generous, and I can't thank you guys enough. So, but Steve's story, back to that. So
Steve has been medevac to Kandahar.
No, he was in such dire straits, like he was going to die. They had to evacuate him to a forward trauma fire base called Salerno that was originally run by the Italians. And so I think the 173rd Airborne took over after that. But that place used to be dope. You could literally go there and it was like Olive Garden on steroids, for food. Like other militaries got it going on, like when you go to their chow halls. But
so the Italian military chow hall was the place to be based.
That's what's up. Yeah, and the Germans too, because then you could get wine. So,
got it.
But
no wine at the American bases.
No. We're trying to be culturally sensitive, But no.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no alcohol.
The only people that were allowed to do it were the Marines on Marine Corps birthday. So you always made friends with Marines. So, yeah.
Bakeware says, by the way, this is so rare for a veteran to candidly share any part of their story. Sledge, you are a legend.
Thank you. I know him. So, by the way, he's a good dude, good friend of mine. So Steve, he gets, he has to go to this forward trauma surgeon. And the problem is they remove some of the shrapnel, but some of it is too close that they'll nick like the arteries in his arm. So they just have to like close it up and like leave it in there and, get the bleeding staunched. And it hit all manner of nerves. Like he was on a what's called a profile for the military for years because he couldn't even do push-ups. So out of that, he wakes up and he's like, I got to go to the bathroom. And they're like, well, here's a bedpan. And he's like, and he's totally messed up on morphine. And he's like, I'm not pissing in that. And they're like, you can't even stand. And he's like, try me. And so he like tries to get out of the bed and just immediately falls over. And they're like, all right, you want to try the bedpan now? And he starts like low crawling towards the door. So the nurses like have to, this is how iron-willed this kid is. They have to like lift him up and like take him to these piss tubes, which are basically PVC pipe hammered into the ground with just a ton of lye. And so they stand him up and he's like, you can't hold me. I'm not going to be able to pee while you got to let go of me. So they're like, you're going to fall. So he's like, I'll be fine. So sure enough, they let go of him. He falls straight into like this pee and like lye and all tons of people's pee. And he just lays there, moves his skirt back, and just pees into the ground. And so they hoist him up and he gets back to the bed and the medic looks at him and goes, what did we learn? And he goes, fine, I'll use the bedpan. So he recovered, and then I met him in Kandahar, and we finally found each other in when we were at Charlie Medical. I'm getting my hand cast, he's getting shrapnel removed. So it, and then for the next little bit, he and I had the same jobs. We were just manning radios and recovering, and we had
I was going to say you had an option to come back to the U.S., but you wanted to stay.
Yeah, I couldn't. I don't know why. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving those guys I fought with behind and me getting a free ride home just because I'd gotten injured. And I was like, it's not that bad. Like, my wrist is just broken and my memory's a little foggy. I can still do something. And we're about to go home in a month anyway. So, and I could have been home for Christmas, but I chose to stay. And I'm kind of glad I did because I got to see Robin Williams perform, which was, he performed in Kandahar on Christmas Eve that year. And it was awesome. It's like one of my favorite memories. It was like watching Bob Hope, like my grandfather. So I was glad I stayed and then I went home, but we got replaced, and unfortunately my replacement was my best friend who got killed a week later. So
yeah, talk to me about, well, I just pause there. Just a couple people are asking about heart support, which we've almost raised $1,200 for. For folks,
you guys are beyond generous.
Yeah, for folks who are tuning in, you're involved with them. Can you do a quick description of what Heart Support does and the Veterans Initiative that you're launching?
Yeah, absolutely. So Heart
Yeah.
Support was actually founded by the lead singer of a Grammy-nominated metal band. His name's Jake Lors. He's the lead singer, well, screamer really, of a band called August Burns Red. And he would just have fans come up to him after his shows and just begin to open up about how they resonated with the lyrics to his song. And most of their stories revolved around mental health issues, everything from addiction, depression, suicide ideation, self-harm. And he wanted to find a way to help his fans and give back, but he was like, dude, I scream on stage for a living. But he had this idea to where he could start a nonprofit where people could take proactive steps in their mental health, online through digital and connected community, and also in person, everything from music festivals. And we've expanded well beyond that. We're on everything from Twitch to we're doing festivals at Blue Ridge Festival. But the veteran side of it comes in that metal is huge in the military. It's probably the most popular style of music in the military. And so he would have all these war veterans coming up and just telling them stories. And he came to me one day and was like, hey, I really want you to, help with a veterans initiative that we want to start here at this organization. I was like, no. And it was because I was dealing with my own, wounds, dealing with my own crap from the past. And eventually, to make a long story short, I caved. And we've been working together with another entity called the Veterans Project, which captures the legacy of our war fighters, and a lot of their stories encompass, addiction, depression, suicide ideation, where they wanted to give up, especially seeing the things that they've seen, everything from post-traumatic stress disorder to moral injury. Moral injury, just to explain very quickly, is when you're forced to do things that violate your sense of right and wrong, like if you have to shoot a kid or a woman. Things that naturally, unfortunately, happen in war. And out of that, we just said, we want to take what we built here, expand that specifically for veterans, and then build workshops, city impact zones in military installation cities, and just help our veterans. Because so often I was one of these people. I'd be like, the VA sucks and we need better help for our veterans, and they're like, and everyone was like, yeah. And then I was like, and I'm not going to do anything about it. And we realized that if we don't take care of our own, who's going to? And that's really the initiative that we're starting. And so we've been building a coalition of veterans, of men and women who desperately care about the mental health of our veterans, whether they've deployed or not, and helping them move forward and take proactive steps in their mental health, because we believe in post-traumatic growth as opposed to just staying stuck. We want to see them live out that warrior ethos in life and career and everything that they do.
And the types of programs you'll be offering will be offered to veterans throughout the country, or is it just focused in Colorado Springs right now?
No, we have initiatives planned. We're working with a former Sergeant Major with the 82nd Airborne out of Fort Bragg. I'm here in Colorado Springs. It's starting these initiatives that you got to get that oomph behind it. And so, we don't want to rush things that aren't ready. And so, our executive director is really taking that lead and he's a veteran also. So he's just really wanting to make sure that our impact is viable and sustainable.
Talk to me about the initiative with this week in mind, as you've been talking to fellow vets.
Oh, man.
You're very outspoken, and we talked a bit before this about how difficult that is for some folks to talk about their experience.
Right.
What has this week meant? Is it, as traumatic as it is it also affording some folks an opportunity to speak openly about their experience for the first time? Just kind of take me to some of the conversations you're having with people.
I think a lot of the conversations have been between veterans. I've had so many phone calls and conversations, and my boss will call me and I'll be like, hey, I'm on another call with another veteran, and one of them is his nephew, and he's like, dude, I got a letter from my interpreter. What do I do? How do I get these people out? And I was like, for now, we write letters on their behalf, humanitarian letters, and we contact our centers. We do what we can, and if we can see this as another war to fight, it'll give us purpose. And out of that, I think a lot of us are just really confused and hurt. You know, and it's like I said in my article that you brought up, it's like you want to let go of Afghanistan, but it's like a toxic relationship that you can't. And we none of us wanted a forever war. We wanted it to end. We just didn't want it to end like this. And for most of us, you know, we've watched the politicking between both sides, and we're furious at them. And we're like, you guys are all moronic imbeciles who kept us there, you know, regardless of what political spectrum you were on, and botched this thing just like you did Vietnam. And I literally texted a buddy of mine. He was a Warthog pilot in Vietnam. We would go to dinner every Sunday before I moved to Colorado Springs for 10 years. And, you know, we just talked about our experiences. And, you know, we had that brotherhood, that camaraderie, you know, and he's in his 70s. And I just texted him probably about midnight last night because I couldn't sleep. And I was like, I said, I finally feel your pain. You know, I said, I know how you felt now after Vietnam. And he said, you know, he responded back. He was like, you do? And he said, and me just watching this stuff, he said, I have so many emotions for you, and it brings up so much for me. And he said, but right now I think most of it is anger. And I don't know, you know, the things that I've talked to about other veterans is we're worried about, you know, these efforts. We're thinking about our friends, you know, we're laughing at stories and recalling events that were funny to us or just crazy and how we survived. And then other times we're crying because our friends are dead. And, you know, we're trying to make sense of all of this. And I think most of us are mad that the Afghans just really didn't do anything to fight back, that the Afghan National Army just kind of rolled over. Like, they literally had to hold the country for 2 weeks, and they didn't. And the realization that I had to come to was effectively that, you know, we could put every single troop we have here in the United States into Afghanistan. We could spend trillions more dollars, and we could have a million different deaths. But until somebody's willing to fight for something that they love, they won't do it. And I think that's really, it boils down to a lot of the culture that's there, where, you know, they have their tribal loyalties, they have their territory. You know, you have all these different provinces. You know, Paktika has their allegiances there. Missouri stands its own pretty much sovereign thing that's never been conquered by anyone ever, and you will get killed there. And then, you know, you have everything from Jalalabad, and you have so many different tribes there. You have Tajik and Pashtun, and you know, there's like 4 different languages spoken there. And then you have Herat, which is closer more to the Iranian border, and it's just, you know, it's a hodgepodge. It's a real melting pot, and there's a beauty to that inherently, but there's also just kind of a collective shrug, like, you know, Afghanistan, whatever. And I think in that manner, they really do. I think they just want to be left alone. And as long as the Taliban just doesn't screw with them too much, they'll just be okay with it. And I mean, they've literally had almost every army like walk through Afghanistan, from Alexander the Great to the British to the Soviets to us. And all of us have just said, it's not worth it. You know,
it's a several thousand year history here, and there's a reason why it's the Afghanistan has been referred to as the graveyard of empires.
Yeah. There's literally a book called Empire Breaker. Yeah, you know, and that's what it is.
And it's remarkable, you know, you're talking about that a lot of these folks that you were dealing with on the ground there didn't see the Taliban as inherently evil,
right? Like Americans do. We're like, they're bad. You know, and they're like, they're religious brutes, but as long as they leave us alone, we're fine. You know,
right? They're willing to tolerate their religious beliefs for the sake of stability and you know, slightly less corruption than the previous government, right? I don't know. Yeah. We have a note here, by the way. Somebody saying, I think the Afghan women will disagree with you. They are not okay with.
I'm totally, like, you have to. What I'm speaking from the perspective of here is Number one, we were never allowed to interact with women. If we even walked into a village, they had to go inside. And Afghan women are beautiful, but they like, I'm sure you've seen the National Geographic, but it was hard pressed that you'd ever see them. They begin, wearing the burqa and the scarf when they reach, maturity and are of marriage age. And out of that, you just never saw them in the villages because of the fact that they are treated like property. They are just seen as, for baby making. And I guarantee they're not okay with it, but they've been so oppressed and marginalized that it's hard to hear their voices. And those that have spoke up, and that's my real fear, is that they're going to be executed. I'm afraid that little girls are going to be raped and sold off to Taliban as war prizes. There's a lot of just grief that I feel out of that for the women of Afghanistan. And I believe, I can't say for certainty, but I believe that the vast majority of them hopefully are grieved by this. So,
we have a question here about your book, the title, when it comes out, how people can potentially buy it. I don't know if they can pre-order it. Talk to us about it.
I turned in my manuscript and everything back in May. Due to COVID, it was supposed to release in April. We want to do a spring release, but due to COVID and all like the paper jams and everything, publishers are actually backed up. So they have since postponed it to June 28th. And then they were like, hey man, we're really excited. There's a lot of buzz around your book. And so they're like, we're going to do it for Memorial Day. And I was like, I'm going to be on a Memorial Day trip with all the dudes from the book, and I was like, we'll not be around. And they're like, crap, we have to move it again. So it's either going to be May or June of next year, just because of publishing delays is really, but the title is called Where Cowards Go to Die.
And it's your story through the military?
Yeah, so it's my own personal journey through, I grew up in Oklahoma in like the Buck.
Wait, I'm having trouble hearing you. Do you hear me? Wait, sorry, I just had an audio fail here. We've lost audio. I lost audio from you. Ben? Maybe unplug your earphones. We just lost you. Shoot. You hear me. Okay, they can hear me, but we can't hear you. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. We've lost. Do you want to take out your headset and just use the iPhone mic? I've lost you. Maybe you muted yourself? Wait. I don't know what happened here. I can't hear you. I don't know what happened here. Oh, we've lost you. Oh, he left. Maybe he's going to try to come back in. We'll hold on here and see if former Staff Sergeant Sledge can join us. I think he's logging out, and hopefully he's logging back in now. So we'll wait 1 second. Stand by. He was talking to us about his book and his experience in Afghanistan. He trying to log in. All right, here we go. We're back. Let's view Sledge. Send. Let's see if he is back with us in a moment. Stand by.
Hey.
We hear you again.
I know.
I don't know what happened.
That was bizarre. That was super bizarre. I literally...
Is there someone else publishing a book that didn't want it? No.
Yeah, I mean, my agent is actually watching this, and she texted me. She's like, "Nobody can hear you." I was like, "Oh no." So,
well, I'm glad I took out my earphones. I didn't know if you'd take out yours. Anyway, so you were telling us about your book. And
yeah, where cowards go to die. So I grew up in Oklahoma, in the Buckle of the Bible Belt, and kind of in this religious fundamentalist environment. And, and I'm like, I don't know what I believe anymore. Like by the time I'm 17, because I'm watching like all these just crazy pastors do everything. And I'm like, I got to get out of Oklahoma. So that's why I joined the military. Part of it was like, I wanted adventure. I wanted to get the hell out of Oklahoma. And so, I do the Army Reserves, college. And I was like, I figure I'll travel and stuff. And then of course, September 11th happens. And, it basically chronicles this odyssey of me, growing up in a really good home, very much, Leave It to Beaver kind of family life. And then what ends up happening is, I go to war and I just really begin to see the dark underbelly of like human nature. And I have this existential crisis because like, at this point I'm like, really, I just don't care about humanity. I come to this conclusion while I'm in Afghanistan that like, I'm like, what is the point of the human existence? Like, not what is the point of your individual existence. There's intrinsic value and extrinsic value. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, holy crap, as a human species, we are fantastic at killing each other. Like and as much as enlightened as we like to pretend that we are, we've just figured out how to kill people groups faster, drone strikes, and everything. Yeah. And yet war is this inevitable part of like human nature. And so I begin kind of this journey, and most of it's really about, me processing everything that I've done in war and embracing nihilism and then kind of coming to reject that. And then coming home and struggling really bad when I get home from Afghanistan, like real bad, enough to the point where, I'm drinking, abusing prescription opioids. This is long before the opioid epidemic. I'm kicking in my girlfriend's door. I'm threatening everyone. I'm super violent. And, I just have to have an intervention because I had literally gone from, life is happy and grand to life is dark and worthless. And so I begin to explore, where I find meaning and purpose and direction, because I believe the number one issue that veterans are coming back with, and I can back this up, but if you want me to go into it, is that when they get out, they lack purpose and direction. They once had it in the service and in the military, and there's even a 2012 study that basically shows, it's by Gibbons and colleagues, that shows that if veterans do not find a new unit, a new tribe, or a faith or religious identity to affiliate with, they will continue to struggle the rest of their lives. And so for me, what I knew was war, and I swore that I would never go back. But then like the strangest thing happened where I was like, man, I miss war. I really miss it. And so like, the surge happens, and my team sergeant comes to me. He's like, yo, we need you. And at this point, I'm a staff sergeant. And, I'm
the surge, by the way, just the surge in Afghanistan happens around 2010, 2011.
I'm talking about the surge in Iraq.
The surge in Iraq. Okay.
So this is 2006, 2007.
Got it.
And, my buddy comes up to me and he's like, you're coming to F in Iraq with us. And I was like, no way, man. It like almost ruined me last time. You know that. And he's like, we need you. You're one of the most seasoned non-commissioned officers we got. You'll get your own team. He's like, you'll lead your own 4-man team. And I was like, sounds sexy. And then, he's like, hey, everybody else from Afghanistan is going. And there's like, your parents, they'll ask you, like, if all your friends were jumping off a bridge, would you do it? For a veteran, if all your friends are doing it, you're totally doing it. So they're like, we're going to Iraq. I was like, all right, I guess I'll go to Iraq. And I'd gotten married at the time to like my college sweetheart. And, we'd barely been together. And I'm like, going to war, bye, kind of thing. And, find out like it's a special mission, and they're going to the most violent city on earth, Ramadi, Iraq. And like, if you don't know anything about Ramadi, like Google the Battle of Ramadi. It'll go down as like the Battle of the Bulge for like modern day. Chris Kyle was there. Everyone and their dog was there. That's written books about it. And it's a insane environment. We called it the meat grinder when we got there. It accounted for half of all deaths of the United States Marine Corps from 2006 to 2007, and half of all daily attacks that were happening in the country of Iraq during that time period. I mean, we just walked into hell. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm right back where I need to be, you know? And I'm leading my team. And then, you know, I'm there for 15 months because this is when we're doing long deployments. And, you know, my wife leaves. And I'm just like devastated and crushed. And so I come home and, you know, I don't have a job because I've been fighting a war for almost a decade. I don't have a place to live, so I go live on my best friend's couch in Austin, Texas, and become one of those statistics, you know. And then I just start drinking. I'm getting worse, and the story just chronicles that recovery into mental health, finding faith once more for me. You know, I don't want to pound people over the head with that, but it was an important part of my journey, so it is in the book. And then really talking from a philosophical, existential point of view, like where do we derive purpose and meaning? And then also what all the war books don't cover is that, like, what happens to the veterans, like, when they get home? And really the book is kind of like a mix between, like, With the Old Breed, which is written by Eugene Bondurant Sledge. I don't know if we're related. That'd be totally dope if it ended up being the case. And Band of Brothers, because you're going to meet you're going to meet a very colorful collective of guys in the book that are some of my best friends, you know. And we didn't talk to each other for 10 years after we got home from Iraq because we were all dealing with our own crap. And we just didn't know how to talk to each other about it. And now, you know, we're like this. And, you know, they're really excited about the book. And I did extensive interviews to make sure that everything was correct. And, you know, and then I told some of the story from their perspectives because I wanted to have people be in their eyes, like what was going on when they're getting shot at, you know, and then also coming home. What was that like, you know, and then how did we readjust? You know, how do veterans readjust? And so it's one of those things that encompasses, like, you know, you know, it's almost like Lord of the Rings. Here's this dude who's in the Shire, and then he's got to go to Mount Doom, and then after he gets home from Mount Doom, he's got to figure out himself, and that's really where it is. So, and the last I named every chapter after a metal song because I love metal, if in case you haven't figured that out yet. And the last chapter is named after, he's a friend of mine. He's the lead singer of a band called Fit for a King. But he wrote this song called When Everything Means Nothing. And I felt like that was the appropriate way to end it, and you'll discover why the title of the book is called Where Cowards Go to Die. So,
what you lay out there seems to be the one of the reasons that you've gotten involved in Heart Support and the Veterans Initiative to help folks like the situation you were in. Was there, and which we're raising money for on the bottom of this live right now, almost $1,250 at the moment.
Thank you guys so much. You guys are incredible. Wow.
It's incredible. It's an incredible community here. Actually, you have a question here from someone who's as a fellow vet whose heart is breaking. Do you feel like this is a humanitarian crisis?
Yes, in many ways. You know, if you look at it, the comparisons to Vietnam, you look at exactly what happened to these refugees that got in these boats to escape Vietnam and just floated out in the ocean. I knew a guy who's a special forces guy who literally the reason he joined the military was because he was born during the fall of Saigon, and then his mom, all of his uncles were killed, and because they fought with the Americans, and then they became refugees. And what you're going to have is a ton of women and children that are trying to. We've all seen the videos of Kabul airport, but we're so focused in on Kabul that we're not focusing in on, like, what's happening to these families that help the Americans over in the border areas like Jalalabad or Salerno or Organy in the Paktika provinces or down in Helmand.
Afghanistan is the size of Texas.
Yeah.
We're talking about one city.
Yeah, and so. How do you handle this? And especially with a force that is effectively has deep ties to terrorist entities, pushing religious views and doing a phenomenal job of a PSYOP campaign where they're, everybody's posting on Twitter right now about like Taliban eating ice cream and driving.
Well, so hold on. So explain what PSYOP means to.
So
what the word PSYOP means.
It stands for psychological operations, and it's basically where you manipulate, persuade, or influence somebody to do the things that you want. There's 3 types of PSYOP that we use in the military, and what's funny is a lot of this is going on in the news right now, and they use all of these tactics. It's illegal for us in the military to actually use them on the civilian populace, but the media is totally comfortable doing it. There's white propaganda, which is your most used one. It's ones where you just leave facts out so you can spin a narrative. There's gray propaganda, which is predominantly political, and then there's black, which is inherently deceitful, and you rarely ever use black because most people can sniff that out. But if you can spin a narrative the right way, where you're leaving stuff out, okay, cool. Like, great example. Taliban have taken over, and then they post photos of themselves doing fun stuff, online, where it's like, hey, we're driving go-karts, we're playing, we're working out in the palace.
So the Taliban's engaged in every level of these PSYOPs right now.
Oh yeah, they're doing a fantastic. Like, for me, having worked in that environment, I'm like, brilliant. Like, I can give them golf claps even as much as I despise what's going on right now, because I recognize what they're doing. And the problem is like, the American populace, especially with social media, and that's what they're using. They're using social media, and everybody's like, it's not, but you're getting such conflicting reports. It's like, oh, well, they didn't really, do this stuff to this woman. Look at them. They're just dancing and doing their thing, and they're eating ice cream and having a good time. It was trending the other day. It was like Taliban PR. And I'll tell you what, for me as a veteran, that made me sick. Like, to see the populace being like, oh, look at the Taliban, this is funny. I'm like, it's not funny for us. It's not funny at all. It's devastating because we know exactly what's going on there, and we know what's happening to those people. And so that's that right there. That's where we're angry. That's where we get angry.
Question here from JDW Loves to Read. Thank you for your service. Is the book available for pre-order?
Oh man, I wish it was. Unfortunately,
we'll bring you back. We'll bring you back when it is.
Please do. I would love to talk about it. And I know my publisher and everybody would love to. But like I said, they're so backed up that I've had it professionally edited by a friend of mine who's an award-winning editor, and then that has to go through the other edit process with the actual publisher. So I'm waiting on that. We just finished up the book cover shoot, and it looks phenomenal. For me, my background's in graphic design and web development, and so I was very stingy with them. But I got to work with a graphic designer who's doing the cover, and we came up with this crazy idea. We're like, oh, let's do this photo shoot; it'll be amazing. And so I just got the photos back like last night, and I'm just jazzed on it. So I hope that you guys love it. I hope you read it. I hope it explains so much more that happens to veterans. My wife has the advanced version of it. As do, all the guys that are in the book had to read it. Obviously, they had to sign off on it. But, it put some of them in a tailspin for a few days. Like, it was hard for me to write. My wife said she's cried a lot throughout the entire thing. It was extremely difficult for me to write. There was just days where, just meander around the house because you're reliving this stuff. And I think that's been the hardest part about exactly what we're talking about is like, in some ways I'm that 21-year-old kid again, standing on the tarmac, watching his friend get medevaced and, wondering what's going to happen.
What question as a non-veteran, on behalf of all non-veterans is how can we best support you?
Okay.
And the community?
I love this question. Let me dispel some myths because they're really, really important. I get questions all the time from civilians as far as like, how can I talk to veterans? It seems like they only want to talk to other veterans. And the reality of the situation is that we are desperate to talk about our experience, we are terrified that you are going to judge us because of the stories we tell. Because if you look at military and first responders, you're dealing with inherently dark things that happen. There is and I'll just be honest about this because I wrote about it recently. You can go read it on Medium. The article is called "What It's Like to Kill Dogs." And effectively, there was this story and this is when I realized I'm never going to talk to anybody about anything, is when I got home from Afghanistan. And, my friends are like, tell us some stories, like, what, we want to hear some war stories. Everybody wants to hear that. And I'm thinking about these dogs that we just murdered. And we started this game because in Afghanistan, dogs are very feral. They're not seen as pets here. And I had a dog back home, so this will make it even more messed up, is they would try and like attack you and bite you. And so they would come into the base, and one day, our commanders run around, and these feral dogs start chasing them, and they're full of rabies. So he pulls out his .45, he shoots one, the rest run off, and then he calls the sniper team up and he goes, kill all the dogs in the surrounding area. He's like, they're biting our soldiers. And he was like, we can't have them keep coming onto base. This is going to create problems. And so they do. But the dogs always come, more dogs come back. And so they like chase your Humvees and stuff. And so we just created this game called Dog Strike, where we just started running over dogs with our Humvee. And this is like everybody on base. And you're just laughing about it. And so I'm telling this story and I'm laughing. And you're doing this stuff because you're seeing, like, you don't know how to stay sane. And you're seeing like what Afghans are doing to children, and then you kind of slip into the abyss too. And when you tell stories like that, people cringe, and we can see it in their facial. It's not what they say, like, oh, I'm there to support you. It's all in your body language. It's 100% in your body language. And when we see you cringe or do that fake smile or kind of, it's like they think I'm a monster. And even me telling that story right now, I'm like, oh God, what are people thinking of me? And I've done enough healing to know that I am who I am, and that happened in the past. And there are things that happen in war that are inherently evil and wrong, and people who haven't been there just don't grasp all of that. But we do want to tell you stories, but you have to be prepared to hear the worst and not respond. And Nancy's actually super correct. It's a coping mechanism, because if you didn't find a way to cope, you would go insane. And so there was just things that all of us did that we would laugh about, things that would normally morally disgust us. And then you get home and you have to live with the person that you are that did those things. It's extremely traumatizing. And so we want to talk about our experiences, but we need an empathetic ear. And also we need to be challenged. Like, everybody's just coddling veterans right now, left and right. And that's crazy to me. Like, we're putting them on, psychoactive and mood altering drugs because we think that they're too dangerous to handle in society. And so what we say is, we're going to put you in an alternate reality because you can't handle this reality. And look, let me put a preface out there. Work in mental health. I'm not the anti-drug guy. I'm the drugging everybody and our veterans, because that's what's happening. And it's happened to all of our friends, and we can speak to that. And the reality of the situation is we need civilians to come along beside us to help share our stories, and for them to hear us and to listen empathetically, but also at the same time challenge us to get better. And so the way that you can help a veteran is to befriend one. It's as simple as that. And the weird thing is, if I came to somebody that I knew was sexually assaulted, and within the first, 2 weeks of knowing her, I was like, tell me about your rape. That'd be a totally inappropriate response. And yet everybody thinks it's okay for them to probe veterans with all these questions. Hey, did you ever kill anybody? Did you ever do this or this or this? And we'll open up about that stuff in time. We'll open up about that stuff in time. We have no problem opening up about that stuff, but you have to give us time, right? And you have to normalize our experiences. The thing that's going to really be key is the same way that you would help a friend who is going through a traumatic breakup, and just, being there for them is really the way that you're going to get veterans to open up. The reason that I readjusted to civilian society was not because of other veterans. It was because of 2 civilians who totally normalized my experience. And I would tell them stories, and their response was typically just, man, I can't even imagine that. It sounds like you've had a rough go, but I'm here
Yeah.
for you, and you can tell me anything. And they didn't judge me. They listened to me empathetically. And then at the same time, they challenged me to get better. And out of that, by normalizing my experience, I didn't feel like this monster. I felt like I could begin to talk about things. And that really, really, really helped me readjust to the society I was in. So the best thing you can do is just befriend a veteran and ask questions as they open up. And you're going to ask the wrong question. People are like, what don't I say? I'm like, you're totally going to botch this. You're going to say something. But veterans need to have thick skin. We go through the gauntlet in the military where we effectively, I mean, we're yelled at, told.
Oh no, we lost your audio. I lost your audio. We lost your audio again. Just like last time. Do we need to exit and come back? I don't know what happened. We've lost you again. I'm sorry. We're having slight audio issue with our friend. We're gonna bring him back for the third and final round in a moment. Incredible insights by Benjamin Sledge. There's a book coming out next year on his experience in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and most significantly coming back to the U.S. And trying to find meaning and deal with mental health again. Oh, I do need to create a sign that says we lost your audio. Okay, hold on. I think he's back again. Stand by. Hold on. Let's see if we got him. Let's see if we're back. Incredible. Oh, we got audio again.
I figured out what happened. My daughter's trying to call me, and she's on my emergency list, so it cuts out the audio.
Oh, okay. Well, is everything okay with your daughter? Most significantly?
She's 5. She's fine.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So she called me earlier, and then she tried to call me again, and it goes through like her like little we gave her like access to like a little iPad that has like instant messenger for like Facebook on it, and so she'll like try and call me like while I'm at work, and sometimes we'll just chat. I want to be a dad. And so
I feel like it's par for the course in this Zoom COVID world we've lived in, where like like, even if the kid's not literally there, the kid is impacting the but you were speaking at length about how non-veterans can interact with veterans and that will inevitably say the wrong thing.
Yeah, you're going to say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because literally in the military, we go through a gauntlet where, like, no joke, people just tell us how worthless we are, and we come out stronger.
It's part of your training.
It's part of your training. And yet we get home and everybody's like, they're there, and they're like, you can't handle life anymore. And I'm just like, no, like, and again, it goes back to like, I want us to carry out that warrior ethos in life, family, career, everything that we do, because I really believe that the more that we, normalize our experiences and then have civilians come along beside them. And if you look at like historically, civilian populaces actually came alongside our veterans when they returned home from war. Like if you look at the Navajo, they did that when they would have these purification rites. When you look at the Crusades, which is, everyone's like, oh, it's awful. But what they did there was really the way that the church viewed it was actually kind of really awesome. They viewed killing another human being as morally wrong, and so they had to go through a purification period once these knights returned home, in which the local church was a part of, and they just kind of owned all of it together, because that's the thing I think we forget in our society today is by living in any country in the world, you submit to their laws and their rules. And regardless of whether or not you vote, don't vote, if you're a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, conscientious objector, whatever it is, you are submitting yourself to the governing authority of the entity or the state that you live in. And regardless of whether you disagree, we vote to put people into those elected positions that, whether justly or unjustly, will send young men to fight and die on behalf of their country. And so it's on all of us because, you know, it's the unfortunate nature of war, and I think we tend to forget that.
Is there a way, you know, you're talking about befriend a veteran, talk to a veteran. Are there organizations that people can connect with, donate to, or at bottom line, sign up for in order to be able to engage folks who need to be engaged?
You know, I think everybody around them knows a veteran. I'm just going to be straight. And I think it's more important to have it happen organically as opposed to, you know, veterans being a pet project.
Right. Not big brothers, big sisters for veterans, right?
Yeah, you really don't need that. Like, so let me tell you this. If you're a VC, hit me up right now because I have this idea. And I will sue the crap out of you if you steal this. No, I won't. I don't know anything about that. But
there might be a VC on right now.
Yeah.
We'll also post this. Yeah.
Man, I have this idea, right? Because we want to bridge the gap between civilians and military. And I'm like, how cool would it be? Because like right now we have like the VFW, the American Legion, and all that stuff. But that's for veterans specifically, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other thing too that we're effectively seeing is just like we want to bridge the civilian soldier divide. And the cool part about everything that I've come up with is like, what if we created a space that's almost like the American Legion, but it's like the coolest spot in the city, and it's like funded by like every entity from like, you know, Tito's Vodka to like, you know, game places, and you have it be like, you know, those really cool high-end places where you have like bowling alleys and there's like super swanky cocktails, and then, you know, there's like live music and these bands come in and do these performances. But here's the deal, you know, it's for veterans, but you can only bring 2 of your friends that are civilians. And then by bringing those civilians in, and everything's like discounted dirt cheap. So you're like, you know, you're not like, oh, thank God it's $9 beer night. It's like, oh, dude, I want to go to this place with my veteran buddy because beer is like $2 or something. Or, you know, they have these really cool, like, you know, arcade games and you know, this is where everybody goes to hang out. And then you start bringing the civilians that way. And by being in that collective environment, because it's so cool and whatnot, veterans are just going to start talking to veterans, and their friends are going to be there. They're going to overhear the conversations. They're going to jump in, and then they're going to begin to understand. So it's an idea, and it would take like a lot of like funding from like other entities and organizations.
It sounds like there's interest from Bonk Nation here. She refers to it as the Hip Legion. I would connect with you on that for Denver.
Yeah, so. I you know, like I live in the Springs, man. Denver would be dope. Let's start an initiative there. So,
I listen. We've gone almost an hour and a half here.
Oh, you're good. I've got
I'm so grateful for your candor. We've raised, I don't know, guys. We're almost at 1,400, and we want to get to 1,400 for heart support. At 51 donations. Let's see if we can get there in the last couple of minutes. Any final thoughts? Anything that I haven't asked you? Anything that you want to express? I mean,
there is one, the Vietnam aspect. So, you know, like I said, you've probably seen the similarities in the pictures that have been going around social media, and just kind of the similarities and parallels. I think the most important thing that you can also do right now is reach out to a Vietnam veteran and be like, man, I get your pain now. I think that, you know, they paved the way for us to be treated so fairly because they were treated so poorly. And now inherently understanding that pain and, you know, everybody's like, why did we leave, you know, Afghanistan? And we know why we left and like why it had to end. But, you know, Saigon, everyone was like, good riddance, you know? And so I think it's really important to, during this time period, because it's bringing up a lot of traumatic experiences too for our Vietnam veterans, because it's like they're watching Saigon all over again, and like they're watching their war. And so that must be very, very difficult for them. And a lot of them, most people don't know this. They assume it's post 9/11 veterans that have the highest suicide rates. The reality of the situation is it's Vietnam veterans. And I asked a Vietnam veteran friend of mine, I said, why is that? You know, why now? And he said, well, think about it. He said, we came home to an extremely unpopular war. So we put our heads down and we did our job. And we had kids and we worked our butts off. We raised the Gen Xers and, you know, the millennials and now we're retiring. And he said, and now we have time to dwell with all of our demons and what happened in those rice paddies over there. And I was like, oh God. And it was like it, you know, just punched.
I was, so in previous life, I was running the CBS Evening News, and we did a whole week from Vietnam during the Trump-Kim Jong-un summit there a couple of years ago. And one of the stories we did while we were there happened to be a group of about 50 Wisconsin Vietnam vets that had come on a mission there to revisit Vietnam for the first time. And they came, some of them came with photos of children they had saved 50 years ago in Da Nang and various towns, and said, can you find this person? I need to reconnect with this person. And you saw that 50 years later, they were still carrying the trauma and the stories and needing to reconnect with the experiences and the people of that war. And it was powerful and heartbreaking and all of the above.
Yeah, it's and you know, I wrote about that in the piece too, where I have this dream of one day going back, you know, and maybe Afghanistan's a peaceful place. Maybe up there in, like, you know, near Bagram, it turns into a ski resort. That'd be dope. They got some killer mountains, and
that's a separate VC investment.
But I don't think that'll happen, and I wonder if I'll just continue to be haunted, you know.
Well, we're here for you. We're grateful for you. We're thankful for you and your service and what you've put it all on the line for this country and for, you know, all the people that you made the difference for in Afghanistan. And so thank you, and thank you for continuing your efforts to help your fellow veterans, and, you know, you're making a world of difference. And you know, every life you impact changes the world. And so thank you, Ben.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you guys. Again, I can't thank you guys enough, and for taking care of us vets all these 20 years. You know, the kindness, the compassion. One of the greatest moments of my life was I was in Dallas Fort Worth Airport heading back to Iraq, and somebody bought my lunch, and never know who it is, but it was one of the coolest moments that I always remember. And so, you know, if you can do that too, do that for a vet. And, like, man, you guys have been great, and I just can't thank you enough. So. All
right, you're getting some incredible messages on the bottom of the screen. Oh, we made it above $1,534 for hard support.
Right.
Please keep us up to date on all the initiatives and the Veterans Initiative as it grows, and stay close, and know you have an incredible support system available to you whenever you need it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Mosh.
Thanks, Sledge. Talk to you.
Bye.